How do we make and multiply disciples around the block and around the world? With hosts Doug Lucas of Team Expansion, Lee Wood of One Body Church, John Hirima of Big Life, Roger Shull of E3 Partners, and special guests from around the world, we'll explore how believers can come together to make more disciples. Welcome to the More Disciples podcast.
Hello and welcome again to another episode of the More Disciples podcast. I am Roger Shull, one of the co-hosts, along with Lee Wood.
Hey, everybody.
John Hirima.
Hey, everyone. Great to be here.
And Doug Lucas.
Good morning.
Yes, and our guest today is Amanda Dinan, who is a co-laborer with Lee in One Body Church down in Tampa. So, Lee, why don't you introduce us to Amanda?
Yeah, so I'll let Amanda do most of the talking here, but Amanda would have been the first disciple from the harvest, definitely a lost to laborer, amazing story of deliverance and being an ambassador, a disciple worth multiplying. She's my dear, dear sister, and she has an amazing story that I know will be a blessing to all of our listeners and viewers. But she would have been from Tampa, which is simply a church of churches locally, and then catalyzing to other places. She would have been the first disciple that's been amazingly faithful and fruitful by the grace of God. So love her with my whole heart and certainly thrilled to have her on the podcast.
All right. Well, Amanda, why don't you just introduce us to yourself? Like, how did you end up meeting Lee? How'd you end up getting started in disciple-making movements? Yeah, you can just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I think how I began, to actually know Lee was actually in my testimony of when Jesus found me, and that was about 10 years ago. So Lee was part of that testimony of that whole thing. So it's been about, it's been 10 years, almost 10 years. I was going through a divorce 10 years ago, and my heart was broken into 1,000 pieces, and was going through, like in Mark 5, the demoniac man. It was a situation like that. I was being, just chased by demons, and just running from them all over Tampa, like in my car, trying to drive away, trying to outrun demons chasing me. And it was a fearful, scary time, and I needed help and reached out to a neighbor. Neighbor gave me a friend's number, which was, Lee. And from there was a kind of a domino effect after Lee prayed for me, kind of leading up to meeting some of his friends here in Tampa, because Lee wasn't in town, and them praying for me and actually seeing the demons leave as they prayed, and seeing the love of Jesus come into a very difficult situation. They pressed into a very difficult situation. They weren't scared or fearful, Lee's friends. They pressed into it. So I'll never forget that.
Amanda, for me, the first time I met you, I was struck by your willingness to just listen to whatever God says now and do it. You just seem like you've taken it all to the bank for him. And probably one of the most astounding stories I've heard is the way you'll hear of somebody in a city 2 hours away, and you'll say, well, I'll go, and you'll drive 2 hours away to talk to that person. Can you kind of walk us through that story that you told me the first time you just drove 2 hours away to pray for somebody? I can't remember if it was in a hospital room, or am I getting it mixed up? Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's such an adventure, like walking with Jesus. It's just so amazing when you can recognize his presence in the moment and just flow out of that place, rather than have a formula or a checklist, but just flow from the heart out. So it's just so cool the way he speaks. Very cool. So I had heard of someone, a 19-year-old up in, Citrus County, which is about 2 counties away. And I heard that there was someone there who had actually lost her voice and hasn't been able to speak for the last 5 months. I was immediately drawn to that difficulty and wanted to see if, we could help in any way. And they were looking for anyone close by that area So I just said, oh, you know what? Let me try and contact this person. And so we did, and we were able to get a little bit of messages back. And so my daughter and I just drove up there. We just felt we needed to go and share light with this person in darkness. And that was done to me. So I want to, share that with others. So went there, picked her up, really don't know this person, haven't really been messaging for a long time. And took her to like a ballpark close by. It was early in the morning, and she couldn't speak. The words she was trying to say were almost like croaking out of her voice. She sounded like, she was like 99 years old, been a heavy smoker her whole life. She's only 19. So the words were squeaking out. So, we knew somehow, we just know that God's going to do something. Even driving up there, it's like you could taste and see that something was about to happen. It's like you just know it, and you just driving up there knowing it. So praying over her was just awesome. She was able to share some of her story, and so just praying over her and just following God's lead. She felt like this coldness in her back, like ice picks in her back. And as we were praying, she was telling us that those ice picks are like leaving her back. She could feel it being released out, and what was holding her throat was releasing. And so, we just prayed some more, and she got the full measure of her voice back right there. My daughter and I witnessed this gentle power of Jesus. And I say gentle because we asked her afterwards, after she received her whole voice back, she said, while you were praying, he was talking to me. And I said, what was he saying? What was Jesus saying to you? She said, he said, I love you, and you are beautiful. This is how Jesus is meeting her right there with such gentleness and meekness and lifting the lowly. It's the power of, you just see the gentle power of Jesus. What a God that we serve, that will enter into. I mean, it makes you want to weep, right?
Yeah.
When Amanda came to faith, the next day, her daughter comes to faith. So that journey, and then I get trained. I just pour into Amanda what Curtis is pouring into me. This is at the very beginning. This is in March of 2013 moving forward, okay? She will describe her testimony as being Hindu and a little splash of Catholic was her background before she came to faith. But she comes to faith and she knows nothing else. And I'm not even very good at this DMM stuff. I'm just getting from Curtis. I'm passing on to Amanda. She's doing the same stuff, right? So one of the ones is she starts immediately, goes into a broken community, and she begins to do a 3/3 group, a discovery Bible study with people in a nursing home. And there's a story associated with the lady. So I tell her, I'm like, Amanda, why don't go into the nursing home? Those people can't do anything. And then I'm talking to Curtis every week, and Curtis says, hey, Lee, maybe the nurses or the family or somebody else will get that stuff from the nursing home. So I go back to Amanda and said, no, stay going into the nursing home. That's how messed up the model and the assist actually was, okay? But look what Jesus actually does. So, Amanda, if you can share that story briefly, and then that gives them sort of a timeline of what immediately starts to happen. Like, she gets to lead her mom to Jesus, baptize her in the bathtub. A 73, was she 73 at the time?
Yes.
Amanda, 73-year-old Hindu her entire life. She leads her mom to Jesus and baptizes her in the bathtub.
So, we're going into the nursing home that's right here in Tampa, and we're meeting there like once a week, and built relationship with one of the ladies there. And she just told the story of how she has 3 sons, and 2 of them have died unexpectedly, where she never got to say goodbye. And now the last son is in hospital. She just found out he's in a coma, in a hospital that was about an hour and a half away from where she was. And she's in a nursing home, doesn't have a ride, has broken family relationship, can't rely on anyone, is just stuck in this nursing home wanting to see her son and doesn't know what to do. So, I listened to the story, and then I'm on my way home after visiting, and I felt God just say, go back. I felt him say, go back. And I was like, oh man, he's about to do something, it's that taste and see that the Lord is great. So I go home, I pick up my daughter again because, we got to share this. I know something's about to happen. Pick up my daughter, and I tell my daughter, because we read in the Bible to anoint the sick. So I told my daughter, bring some oil. We got to bring some oil. I'm just going to pull up to the house, jump in the car. So she brings this bottle of Wesson oil, the cooking. It's a big
Cooking
bottle
oil.
of, with an oil. And so we put it in the car, and we pick up the lady. I sign her out of the nursing home. I'm not family. I'm signing her out. I'm putting her wheelchair in my car. I don't even know if I'm allowed to do this, And I didn't have time to ask Lee anything, but I know we got to go. So we go. We actually go and pick up her daughter around the corner who doesn't have a car, put her in the car. We all drive an hour and a half to this hospital, and she doesn't have a good relationship with family. So she's actually on the list of do not allow this person to come and see her son. She's on the do not allow list. So that's a problem in itself. But we're not looking at that. We're looking at what God is going to do. So on the way there, we're driving, and the mother and the daughter in the back, and all of a sudden, just for a moment, it gets really quiet. And I asked Sabrina, hey, do we have the oil? Because I was really we need to make sure we have the oil with us. 3 times I ask her this just to make sure that we have it, because I'm thinking about all the things we got to do. And then I hear God's voice, saying, it's okay, you have me. That's what I hear. It's okay, you have me. And so then, I got really excited because, wow, Jesus is making his presence known. So it's just being aware and just flowing out of that instead of things that we use, So going into the hospital, all those double doors in the ER, everything opened up. It was crazy. We don't even understand it, but every door opened up. We go into the person's room, and her son is lying there, actually into ICU, into his room without any problem. And the nurse is there, and she's fixing his pillow and stuff. And it's been 7 days now. And so the nurse sees us. She's like, oh, who are you? And so, we say, and the mother's got her wheelchair. She wheels up to her son. She touches his hand. And the nurse is kind of talking to the son, saying, hey, Mikey, who's this? Someone's here to see you, like this. And all of a sudden, as soon as the mother touches the son's hand, the son wakes up. He just opens his eye. He wakes up and he looks at his mother and he says, Mama. And then the nurse was just so shocked. And then she goes, Mikey, you recognize this person? And who's the other person here? And he says, Sissy, that's my Sissy, like this, and he had such a glow about him. He looked so happy, like someone had just given a little kid a big red truck. He had that kind of face. So happy to recognize his mom and sister. And then he went to sleep. He just went to sleep again. So the mom was just full of such hope now. God just is restoring the relationship between the mom and the son. So when I took her back to the nursing home, boy, did she have a story to tell her friends in the nursing home. And, within the next 7 days, he was out of the hospital, no brain damage, nothing, no brain damage. And he was able to go home within 7 days.
Praise the Lord.
Amanda, that's awesome. Every time a story comes out of Tampa with your name on it, I can't read it fast enough because just the way the Lord moves through you and the joy that you show and that you reflect. But, when you had this initial encounter with Jesus and, you talked about even reference to Mark 5:1-20, and you see the demons leave, and now you have this new relationship with Jesus. And now you're living this lifestyle, walking with Jesus. What did that look like early on? Because your stories are all so organic. I mean, it's like anybody listening can say, man, why doesn't that happen for me? And so how do you go about your day? You say there's no formula, but you hear from Jesus daily. And what does that look like for people who are listening and want to incorporate that in their life?
I'm not really sure, to be honest. I don't really know, but I do know that at different seasons of my life, he is building up certain things in me. So like recently, he seems to be, building up like the priestly side of me. Or sometimes he builds up the shepherd side of you. So now I feel like he's building that up. And it's like Jesus wasn't repulsed by my sin or by the dirt on me. He didn't have a repulsion. He stepped into it and he stayed. He didn't leave. So it's just having a mindset of, it's not knowledge that, I find it's not knowledge that people want. It's kindness. It's gentleness. It's love. It's staying. It's, are you able to rely on Jesus so much that his presence is with you, that you can stay in a conversation where someone is in such trauma and such crisis that it's like watching a hurricane actually in front of you, and nothing you say is actually going to stop that from happening. But your presence of light in that darkness is everything, because Jesus will use it. So it's not your knowledge. It's really not. It's the kindness and love of Jesus. His presence is so powerful. I've seen it so many times. So that's why I'm not looking at a checklist. I'm not looking at how much time I am spending in a conversation. I'm not saying, okay, for you, I'm going to give you an hour of my time, because my time I'm not saying that, because my time shouldn't be worth more than their time. So he's teaching me a lot of things about that, and seeing also that we're growing together. So it's not us and them, but it's we. So, I have caution tape all over me. God is working on me. And many times he'll have me talk with someone for a reason. Like there's a reason why someone is in front of you. And it's not for you to feel like, oh, I got to go rescue that person. But it's actually, he's talking to you too. It might be your appointed time to go through something that God is working on. Maybe you haven't grieved in your life for a family member, and you're speaking to someone who's grieving, who's had loss after loss after loss. But pay attention to that, because it's also your appointed time that God is speaking to you too.
Yes, I know who you're talking about, like inside of there. We should have Mama Net and Andre on the podcast, working with broken people, but realizing that that's the part of the we. And that's what people don't get around that, Amanda, that expression of the body is that we think they're lesser, but actually they're more needful for people like us that are broken, that God uses them to touch our life, So all that stuff with the nursing home and stuff like that all happened within months of her coming to faith. And all that looks like out of your belly will flow rivers of water was basically, it was a horrible model. And it says, was Curtis poured into me and me trying to share that stuff with Amanda. She'd tell inside of her story, well, we didn't really understand it. It's just like we'd get these stories and then we just tried to pass them on. But they were doing that. Sabrina started meeting with the kids next door in a 3/3 group. All her neighbors, the family came to faith. The kids baptized brothers and sisters. Amanda baptized one brother, then that brother reached his brother, baptized his brother. There's all kinds of stories like this of how we bear fruit. We don't produce it. So.
Well, I think it's kind of in line with what you're saying, because I hear, Amanda, with you sharing the story about that retirement home and just what you're saying, you're talking a lot about listening to the Spirit, relying on Jesus, bringing the presence of Jesus. But then even Lee just shared within that, she said, oh, this woman, Sabrina, started a 3/3 group. 3/3 is it's your daughter. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great. Now I know. We got to get to know each other better, I guess. But anyways, with that, that's like the 3/3 is just a simple, reproducible process. And so, both those things are needed in multiplying disciples. And I think for someone like me that really can latch on to tools very quickly, or can latch on to processes very quickly, which is a lot of what we talk about, in our podcast. Maybe I can miss the whole like relying on Jesus and listening to the Spirit and those sorts of things. So my question is, if it's someone like me and I'm like, man, I really need to grow in this, but I don't know how, what would you tell me? Like, what advice would you give? What would you try to teach me to do? Like, I don't know if there is a way to teach it. You just kind of have to do it. Like, what would you think about that, Amanda?
Well, if you wanted to learn in like a 3/3, like how to do that.
Or just like in general, like learn to listen to the Spirit more, learn to rely on Jesus more with what I'm doing, instead of just saying like, oh, I got the tools, I can just go do it type of deal, but like relying on Jesus and listening to Jesus and the Holy Spirit in that.
Yeah.
How would you teach me or give advice
I would say to tag along, come alongside someone who is doing that in your town or your community, and just tag along with them during the week. Come for a week and just tag along with that person and see how their day to day is, with how they interact, with people, how they lean on Jesus, how they hear his heartbeat, because it really is your relationship with Jesus that this all flows out from. It's your connection with him. And it's not something big and heavy. It's really not. It's just, trying to connect with Jesus while you're driving your car, going to get gas, just saying, hey, Jesus, I love you. I worship you. I adore you. I have such affection for you. You are magnificent. Just like that, kind of just speaking to him. And he just smiles. He smiles on you. He sings over you. So why not just keep that connection going like all day, while you're doing stuff. He wants to be there. He wants to participate in what you're doing, in the conversations you're having. He is light itself. And he can't wait to go into darkness. He's eager to come in and share himself through you. So can you get yourself out of the way in order for him to just shine to that person? Because he'll do it. He's so faithful. His, like the Bible says, his love endures forever. So he is so faithful.
So, Amanda never really went to the prevailing model of church. Okay. This is all that she's known, the way that she's grown in us with one another. So Doug, it's your turn, but in between, like Amanda, like over the years, like we actually invented, or we got tag along together. So listen to Doug's question, but elaborate on there inside of there. I think of how like people would just show up and what tag along look like, because where we started from and how that looks now, I think we've grown in that with one another, but they have to be able to hear and see. So if you can sort of like inside of the conversation, talk about how that we has sort of emerged into a greater expression of Jesus in people's lives and in community. But go ahead and ask your question though, Doug.
Yeah, your point really flows well into what I was going to ask, Lee. I was just curious. I mean, I know that your background is very wide. I think if I remember right, you have a background, don't you, somehow in India, but it comes through Suriname perhaps, and then England, and now to the U.S. So you've lived in multiple cultures and you've gotten to know so many different people. But what strikes me about you is how disarmingly innocent you seem. How you remind me of like somebody who just walks into a room and just says, Lord, what do you want me to do here? And I think that innocence is so in short supply today because of the church as we've all come to expect it to be, with appointed leaders who have gone to seminary, and they have sometimes official titles, and they certainly are appointed into positions, and you just sort of walk in like angelic, innocent. What is that like, to walk into a room and just ask Jesus, what do you want me to do here, Lord? That's so disarming, Man, am I right about your background? It's India, Suriname, England, and now Florida?
Yeah, so I was born in England, but my family is from Guyana. And if you go back, 4 generations, they were from Bihar, India. So I lived in Guyana for a couple years when I was, younger. And so, but lived until I was 18 in England, then came over here to America, lived in New
Got it.
York, Northeast, moved and kind of moved around until coming to Florida. Yeah.
Got it. And so you walk into a room, and what is that like just to kind of just float in there and say, Lord, what do you want me to do? How is that life like?
I don't really know how to answer that, but I guess knowing my own, frailty, I guess knowing my own brokenness and how fragile we really are, how frail we really are, especially mentally. So you can see a person in a room that looks like they have it all together. Everything's perfect. Nothing's going wrong. But you know in your heart that that God, He restores. He's made the body in such a way that it's so amazing. Like He can restore it to, I guess, how He made it. So even those with like severe mental situations, He can, it's made, the body's like made, the brain is made to like be restored, come back into alignment of how He made it. So I think of myself as, I see the frailty of myself. Things could change in a second. I know that people have buried a lot of their past alive. They haven't touched on the things that, and me, myself included, right? So a lot of the things that on the surface looks perfect, it's not. So I guess recognizing frailty, because God's not looking for perfection.
Yes.
So, Amanda, could you share like a recent story? Because I know it of Susan and what that's looking like and Krista with Healing Hope 3/3 groups to see people actually come to healing and then actually being disciples worth multiplying. Could you tell a couple of stories like that with either Crystal or Susan down to Ingrid and others? Because we're seeing both multiplying for the people that get concrete linear sequential. We're seeing both multiplying disciples and churches to the 4th generation in multiple streams through Amanda as a disciple and as her home church. So could you just tell some relational stories of that or both of those that are recent? Amanda would describe me as like the headline. Like that's how she describes me. Okay. Oh, he's excited. There's vision. Okay. But we got to work down here in the dirt with the broken. And so we are way better together as brother and sister, as an expression of a church of churches. That's what it is. Okay. But it's a relational thing. I've walked through from the beginning, through cancer, through a lot of stuff with Amanda back and forth on both sides of there. I love her. She's my sister in the faith. That's the whole training cycle. Trust me, I'd stack her up against anybody on like the word of God. Okay. Like she's in, obviously it flows out of her, right? That's Jesus. Anyway, that's my way, Amanda. Do you remember the questions I was trying to get you to tell? Tell some recent ones about how God's actually doing that. And it's not structured and controlled, but it's relational and it's flowing in. Pick either one. I don't care.
Okay. Yeah. So the story is of my friend Susan, who I've known for about 7 years. I used to go to a group like up in Wesley Chapel, and that's how we met first time about 7 years ago. It was like a women's group, and we became friends, and it was very sweet. And so we kind of like lost touch actually for the longest time. And then we, as a team in Tampa and others, we did the documentary at loveoneanother.life. And that was a documentary to show what was happening. So I sent the link out to a lot of my friends and included in that Susan. So she got the link and she saw the documentary. She was so moved by the documentary, her and her husband. They were literally sitting on the couch and they were on the edge of the couch listening to the whole 90 minutes of what was going on. And God just stirred in their hearts. They had been wanting to pray for a friend in Bradenton, where they live. And so they just felt like they got the green light. After they watched the movie, they seemed to get the green light to go. So they left, they got off the couch, her and her husband went to go minister to the person. Didn't even know what they were doing. And, but just flowed out of the presence of God from their heart and from praying and, casting out demons of this person, just in the same way that the Bible tells you to do it. They just did it, and demons go fleeing out of this person. And they witness to him the gospel, and he says he wants to do the next step and he wants to be baptized. And so they plan the next few days to baptize him. That in those 2 days, that person has now witnessed to his wife and his 2 kids. So when Susan goes to the Manatee River to baptize this father, the mother, the 2 children are waiting by the Manatee River. The entire household is all being baptized. So it's just like the story of Lydia in a way, because just look at that.
Down by
Everyone
the
by a
river.
river wanting to experience Jesus. I mean, the whole household comes to faith and gets baptized. So that's the story of Susan. But I do want to mention one thing is that, you know, the verse that says, a bruised reed I will not break, and a smoldering wick I will not snuff out. That really shows you so much about this total strength of God's arm, you know, the strength of God to be able to take a mountain and throw it away, or remove a hill, or shake the earth with 2 hands. And yet the gentleness of Jesus is, how do you walk when a candle is smoldering, about to snuff out? How do you walk right next to that candle? It's with a great deal of gentleness. It's a great deal of lower your voice.
Amen.
It's a great deal of being sensitive to not let that candle snuff out. So it's just seeing how Jesus can, you know, just the way he is. It's just so, he's powerful, and yet he's so gentle.
I've seen some of Amanda's artwork, and it's creative. And I was just kind of wondering, how does that play along with your lifestyle as a disciple maker? How do you incorporate that artwork into that?
Yeah, so I used to draw, you know, in my old life, you know, I used to draw rappers, you know, like and I used to idolize. That's just my past before Jesus. So I used to idolize rappers and draw their portraits, but now, you know, God has me just painting a whole different thing, a whole different palette of colors, first of all, because I used to just paint in black and gray. And so after coming to Jesus and asking God, how can I paint or draw to glorify you? Because I don't want to fall into the same trap as before. And I felt like I was different on the inside. So I felt like God showing me to draw things, to draw things that he has created, like animals, landscapes. So I started to do that. And when I did that, it was just a whole new palette of colors. I just didn't understand it. It's like he took out the palette of darkness and put in pastel colors, like spring colors. I wasn't used to coloring like that even. You know, I never used to use bright yellow or pink or, you know, light blue, you know, because when you're in darkness, you're in darkness, you know, everything's darkness, you know. So he was literally bringing me out of the light. So now how I use it, someone mentioned to me that I could use art by drawing a quick like portrait of someone and kind of prophesying over them. And while I'm drawing it, just ask God, what is he saying about this person? And then writing it down in the picture and then giving them the picture so they can see that their Heavenly Father can see them. He calls them, he redeems them by name. He has a plan for them, a purpose for them. He has a new beginning for them. So I guess some people are more visual, like I'm visual. Sometimes it helps to see a picture of what does God see? What is God saying about me? So I try to use it like that. I'm not the best at it. You know, I haven't given it a lot of time. I need to spend more time.
It's like
So this
Picasso.
picture is one that she did for me. And my wife had never seen the picture before. She had this in her home and she saw it. And she walked into the house and she goes, "That's Lee, isn't it, Amanda?" And so the picture of spinning off stuff from that cyclone, she drew this and gave that to me. So it's pretty cool. So she's also used teaching using 3/3 groups as access, using painting with people as in a 3/3 process, and their application obedience is passing on the painting that is the story and telling the story as a means to tell your story and God's story. So much creative stuff has happened through the redemption of everything, of her gifting and talent that God gave to her in art. And I think, Amanda, just because we have listeners and stuff, can they go to Amanda Dinan Art or something, like to people that would be interested in your art, in your artwork? Where is that at anyway?
Yeah, you could go on Facebook. It's Amanda Dinan Art.
There you go. So you'd see a lot of this stuff that's been done through that stuff, both locally, nationally, and globally. There's stories of where people have seen those things and heard the stories associated with them, that there's amazing generational growth. Before we wrap up everything, I just want to tell that last story because so many people on here are interested. Our podcast is about DMM, CPM, disciple multiplying movements, church planting movements. So in Tampa, we want to see, as a church of churches, multiplying disciples and churches who transform communities, and to see that actually happen to the fourth generation. So that story that you just got with Susan, 0 to 1 would have been Curtis to me. 1 to 2 would have been Lee to Amanda. 2 to 3 would have been Amanda to Susan, okay, and her household, okay. 3 to 4 would have been Susan and Larry to Ingrid. Ingrid is, and that family are for not anything beyond there, but the model and assist is ongoing with that household from Susan to that family, that household. So people ask the question, can this occur in a Western context? The answer is absolutely yes, because Jesus is faithful. Jesus wants to give the increase. But that whole thing, if you view that, that's not structured and producing. It's all relational, out of relationship with Jesus, with one another, and it flows that way. So we can't produce fruit, we bear fruit. And that's really the testimony of really our relationship with one another. It's the same as on this podcast. Like, I know Doug Lucas, I know Roger, I know John, we know Amanda. We're followers, abandoned, surrendered to Jesus, right? And we want to multiply the essence of that. So I thought that was a great question, Roger, on your part, about like people just think so concrete, linear, sequential. It's the tools, and they don't realize those things are just tools, that they're not going to make it happen, man.
Honestly, I think that's a pretty good place to wrap up our podcast. You know, I think I would love to, you have so many great stories I'd love to hear. I mean, even you saying using artwork in the midst of 3/3. I know the 3/3, I'm awful at art, but I'd be really curious how you incorporate the two. Yeah, that'd be cool to learn, because I know there's a lot of people who have different outlets but don't know how to use them in a way that can be about disciple making or disciple making movement. But we can use the thing that God has gifted us in that might not seem so spiritual to actually engage with people in a loving and disciple making way. So thank you so much, Amanda, for sharing everything. It was great to hear from you, and I think the Lord spoke through you to me. I know for sure, and I'm sure to our audience as well. So thank you so much.
Praise the Lord. Love you, sis.
Thanks, Amanda.
Yeah, great to be.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you.
How are you making more disciples? What problems have you encountered? What successes have you celebrated? What questions do you have? Share your stories with us by visiting moredisciples.com/contact. If you're looking for next steps on growing your ability to make and multiply disciples, visit moredisciples.com to find resources, tools, and events all designed to help you make more disciples.